Hi friends, welcome to my channel or welcome back to my channel. A lot of parents have been considering homeschooling their kids or what the benefits and like what their options are really. So I wanted to make this video to share with those considering homeschooling kind of what the situation is like from the child's perspective, the ambiguity about the safety of returning to school this fall. I thought this would be the perfect time to share my educational journey and kind of what my K through 12 schooling looked like. I asked for some questions on my Facebook and Instagram, and I received a few responses that I am excited to talk about today. I want to start off by sharing my educational journey. So basically I was in public school from preschool to second grade, and then from second grade to seventh grade I was homeschooled. In seventh grade I went back to public school full-time, 7th, 8th, and 9th. In 10th grade, I was going back to being homeschooled, and I started taking classes at the local community college. 12th grade, I was a full-time student at the public high school, as well as taking some homeschool classes. And then I graduated in 2.5 years from a 4-year university. That's my education, so I feel like I have a good grasp on both what the public school setting and what homeschooling is like. I feel like I could talk about the differences between them and what I have seen as benefits and what I've seen as negatives, I guess, from the child's perspective. So one of the things I asked on my Instagram was what are some assumptions about homeschoolers, just so I could kind of address like the stigma around it, because I feel like a lot of people are fearful of homeschooling because it's not the normal. So I want to talk about some of those. The first thing somebody said was that there was more free time. Now, there is more free time being homeschooled. That doesn't mean that you're not learning what you should or you're not spending enough time on your education, but there is more free time because you can go at your own pace, which is awesome as a kid because you don't have to worry about other students who might not learn things as quickly as you do, and you don't have to worry about students who learn things quicker than you do, and you don't get to spend enough time learning the assignment or the subject that you need. To that assumption, I would say kind of like a yes and no. Yes, there is more free time, but not every day. Some days you might be studying something that's a little bit harder for you to grasp, so you have to spend more time on it. And some days you might grasp everything really easily and then you're done and you have the rest of the day. So in second grade, I basically did all of my assignments from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. and then I was done. But something that my mom and I felt was really important for my education was to make the world my oyster, to look at everything as an educational opportunity, which kind of solidified my love of learning. I've always been obsessed with learning new things, and I feel like I have to blame homeschooling on that, because my mom made everything educational, and that's not a negative, that was a positive. Everything was challenging me, was helping me grow, was giving me something new to look forward to. Every vacation we took was full of, this is the history of this place, and I feel like that's also where my love of travel came from, was just being able to be like, well, what can I learn from here? Like, what do these people like to do? What's hospitality look like in this country? What's family look like in this country? And I feel like that was because my mom made every single place that we visited an educational opportunity. So it wasn't just when we went on vacation, it was also day to day. We would go to a bowling league, and there were people on that league that were old enough to have served in World War II. So although I finished like history lesson for the day before 10 a.m., I'd go and I'd talk to them and I'd learn about their experience and like how that affected their day-to-day life. It didn't make the math, science, English, history, like it didn't make me skim over those things. It didn't make me not remember those things to only do them for those 2 hours, those like in the morning. It just helped me learn at my own pace and move at my own pace and progress as I was able to, and not at the liberty of an entire school system deciding when it was time for me to learn something new. Another assumption that I got was that homeschoolers are not socialized. So I think that that's interesting that stigma exists, because people assume that the only socialization that you should get is with kids your age. I was always socialized, but I was socialized with adults. I was socialized with kids my own age through something within the public school system from K through 12, which I'll talk about in a minute. But I was mostly socialized with adults who taught me how to act in a public setting based on adults, who taught me how to communicate my emotions, to communicate my thoughts and feelings, and to learn from them, and to ask questions, and to be confident asking questions and asking for help for people that are older than me, which I think is something that a lot of like the school system misses out on, because one teacher can't assist 30 kids individually based on what each specific kid needs. Like, I'm not trying to say anything negative about teachers. I think teachers are amazing. I think teachers should have smaller classrooms so that they are able to be more one-on-one with kids. But the reality is that they just don't have that sort of resources to be able to give one kid 100% of their attention every single day, which is something that homeschooling allows, which makes you, I feel like makes me more sociable and more socialized, because I don't fear talking to adults. I don't fear talking to strangers or to new people, because that's all my life was going around with my mom, or going around with my dad and meeting the people that they know and talking to new people and telling them what I learned and asking them questions and learning from them. So I feel like the homeschoolers in my life are probably more socialized than the public schoolers who have start their education and their education with the exact same people. My social circle was constantly changing. A negative in that aspect is that it's harder to keep in touch with people because you're not in the same building with them your entire childhood, which is, I think, kind of a negative. I don't know. I feel like I kind of missed out on the whole best friend, like day one best friends kind of thing, because my life just was constantly changing being homeschooled. Somebody else said that they assumed that homeschoolers don't get as good of an education, and I kind of laughed when I read that. My education was personalized to me, what I wanted to learn, the pace at which I learned, and what I felt like, what my mom and I felt was beneficial to me. So I feel like my education surpassed that of somebody who had to go to one classroom every day and read the same stories and the same books as all the other kids in their classes, not even considering what they might have already known. What most kids learn in a K through 12 system is checklists. It's, okay, do they know this about American history? Do they know this about science? Do they have this formula memorized for math? But my education was more applicable to my life as an adult. So I learned how to write checks and to balance checkbook and to communicate with a bank teller based on my needs, things that are applicable to daily life, which I feel like is more beneficial for my education rather than a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Like, I still did learn that stuff, but I learned that stuff at my own pace, which math for me was always slower. So I spent a lot more time on math than most kids did. Like in accounting, sort of how to write checks, how to communicate with bank tellers, how to budget your money, that was something that we added to the curriculum that I was already taking. So I feel like, I don't know, I feel like my education was broader and more specialized to me than the good education you get in public school. The last stigma that I'm going to address was somebody assumed that homeschoolers won't get into college. And that is something I'm going to talk about at the end of this video, is my advice for applying to college. But I went to Kansas State University and I got in there having been homeschooled. So I feel like that's a testament to it is possible. I know homeschoolers that have gotten into a lot of different universities, some Ivy Leagues. You can still apply, you can still get in. They don't only recognize public education as the only education. There are actually a lot of different forms of education, which is what I'm going to get into next. So homeschooling isn't just doing school at home, because there are curriculums for that, which I think are really important, because certain parents don't have the ability to give 100% of their attention to their kid all throughout the day. Some parents work at office building, some parents work from home. So I think it's important to recognize that there are curriculums for that kind of parent. But there are also curriculums where you do co-ops. So you go to a building and that building has parents of other kids that can teach your kids, and Although during this pandemic right now, that's not necessarily ideal. That's pretty much sending your kid to school. But for some parents, that is a great option because they might not be very good at math, but there's a kid in your community whose mom is a mathematician. So you send your kids to this co-op and their math class is taught by this mathematician woman, which just helps your kid have a better, more rounded education. There's also unschooling, and unschooling is where you make the environment your school. So unschooling is kind of like going to museums to learn history instead of reading it in a book, or going to the library and picking out your favorite English, like your favorite literature, and reading it over and over again and talking to your mom about it instead of like taking a test and writing an essay. So there are like a lot of different types of homeschooling that it's important for you as a parent to research before you make the decision of what your kid is going to be learning, because maybe it's going to be best for you to do unschooling because you have the ability to take your kid to a museum every day, but you don't have the ability to sit down and like purchase them books and books and books. So there are some curriculums that I suggest. Being a Christian, I suggest Switched on Schoolhouse or the Alpha Omega Life Packs. Life packs are really easy and simple, especially if you have to take your kid with you on the go. Switched on Schoolhouse is a CD program that you upload into your computer, and then every day it's kind of set up the same as Life Packs, just one's on paper and one's on the computer. But basically there are teachers on this program. So you click on, let's say you're like doing an English lesson. So you click on English, you'll like read this short story, and there's going to be things that you can click on that are like don't understand this problem, whatever. So you click on it, and then there's a tutor that Alpha and Omega has hired to do this little segment, and they'll talk about what you should be learning, what you should be noticing, and how to notice it, and they teach you how to learn. The life packs come in history and geography, literature, science, and math, and you can get them like in other things. So there's like an accounting one that teaches you how to like write a check, and like there are different packs. So each packet has 4 sections. And at the end of each section is a self-test, and at the end of the 4th self-test is your unit test. So how my mom would do it was day 1 I would do 1 unit, and then the next day I would do the self-test, and then I do the 2nd unit, and then I do the 2nd self-test, and then I do the 3rd unit, and then I do the 3rd self-test, and the 4th unit, and the 4th self-test. And then on the next day would be a recap study day. So I'd go back through and I'd write down like on a separate piece of paper everything that I think would be important to know for the unit test. And then the next day I would take the unit test. So, and I would always get weekends, which is something that I know of some homeschool parents that don't give their kids weekends. Every day is a school day. Some parents that only give Sundays off, some parents that follow the public school in their neighborhood. So I think that's what my mom did, because I always had snow days. If the school I would have been attending had snow days, I always had days off when they had days off. There's also separate books that you can buy. Mardella has great books. There are some like co-ops that have curriculum shares, so you can go and like kind of shop for the curriculum that you want and bring those home. There were some history books that I really enjoyed. I read a lot of literature. That's another thing with the life pack literature, is that they always send you 3 books for the whole thing. So 1 year you'll go through 10 units of life packs. So for my like 7th grade, right? So 7th grade you have 10 packets. Each packet has 4 sections and 1 unit test. Some of them have 5 sections, but you understand. So that's kind of how it's structured. And then there's a teacher's guide, which has stuff that you should be helping your kid know, stuff that are important to know for the self-test, stuff that's important to know for the unit tests, and then the answer keys for the self-test and the unit test. But there's also really fun things like activities that they can do, experiments at the science life packs, stuff like that, that you know you can set up for your kid and your kid can explore with. So I will try to like link something in the description box of different curriculums and a little description of like why I suggest them and like why I liked them and what kind of education that kind of sets your kid up for. In 6th grade, I started taking a music class at the local middle school. So the middle school that I would have been going to had I been in public school. And I started making a lot of friends, and I started really wanting to get involved with them. So I was taking electives my 2nd semester. In taking these classes at the local middle school, I started to feel really self-conscious and upset at the fact that being this like 12-year-old kid with like hormones, I was the only person that was homeschooled in my cohort. So I was dropped off by my mom, and I stayed there for those 2 hours, and then my mom would come pick me up. And it felt weird, like leaving my friends and leaving people that didn't leave like I did. I don't know. Like, I don't know why I felt so uncomfortable with it, but anyways, I did. So then 7th grade, 2nd semester of 7th grade, my mom put me in full-time. I was a public school student. 7th grade, I decided that I wanted to be a marriage and family therapist. So at the end of 9th grade, my pastor at my church is a teacher at the local community college for psychology. And he told me about taking psychology classes as a homeschooler, and how it's free and how you get to take this class. And a friend of mine who was also homeschooled was starting to take classes at the community college. So I told my mom that's what I wanted to do. So then 10th grade, and this is where the specialized education part comes in. And it's totally fine to do this, to go back and forth. I mean, public school, or at least my public school, didn't care. Like, they weren't angry at me for leaving. They accepted me back. Like, there wasn't anything weird about it. I went back to being homeschooled 10th grade. I was still taking orchestra, French, and choir at my high school. And I was taking psychology, and I think psychology was the only one I took my first semester of 10th grade. And I was taking all the rest of my education was at home. I don't regret it because I love learning, and homeschooling taught me to love learning. And I feel like that really set me up for success. Here's where my college, like going from homeschool high schooler to college advice part kind of kicks in, is that when you're applying for college, there's an option to apply as a homeschooler. So my situation was interesting because I had gone to public high school. I had a public high school transcript, I had a community college transcript, and I had a homeschool transcript. I suggest staying at a community college, becoming a full-time student, getting however many credit hours necessary, and then applying to college as a transfer student. That way you don't even have to worry about your high school diploma. That is something that I think I should have done. I don't regret my college. I mean, I was at a 4-year university, and I graduated a year and a half early, and I think I wouldn't have really, my life would have been a lot different had I done the associates or applied as a transfer student. But applying as a homeschooler is possible. You as the parent type up a homeschool transcript. There are plenty of samples and templates online that you can find, and then you send that, notarize it, sign it, seal it, send it to the school with like your child's application, and then they'll figure that out. So I did have some hiccups where schools that I applied to got my high school transcript before they got my homeschool transcript, so they thought that I hadn't finished high school, like I wasn't graduating, because I only had like 12 credit hours at the high school, and I had the rest of them were homeschooled, so it's like kind of a weird situation. So I do suggest applying just as a homeschooler and having your mom put all of your credits on that one page instead of trying to do it 3 different ways, or just waiting and applying as a transfer. That's like really the only hiccup of going from being a homeschooler to going into college. So I did get some questions. One of them, which I feel like I answered, was just how my education varied from K through 6, 7 and 8 to being in high school. I feel like I kind of answered that because I just went over basically my whole academic journey. Somebody else asked like, who is my teacher? My mom was my primary parental teaching source. But I think it's important to mention that the world was my teacher. Everybody was my teacher. I had something to learn from everybody. I think that if you are planning to homeschool your kids, you should really take that mental approach that everything can teach your child. So whether it's a history tape or like the John Adams movie, right? If it's like a rainy day and you really can't do anything else and your kid's just gonna watch this movie, well, quiz your kid on the movie. The movie can teach your kid. There are things like that, or there are people in your life that know something that you might not know. Utilize them. It takes a village to raise a child, and as the child having been homeschooled, it's so special to have somebody come to you specifically to teach you and to focus on you and your education and growing your mind. Like, that is something that makes you as a kid have so much self-esteem and so much passion for what you're learning about, because this person is taking time out of their life to come to you and to teach you and to invest in you. So the world was my teacher. Everybody I met was my teacher. Everywhere I went was my teacher. I had the opportunity to learn from everything, and my mom really encouraged that. The last question I'm gonna answer was what I want that for my kids. And yes, of course, I am definitely going to do a varied version of my education for my children. I loved being homeschooled. I loved learning from everything. I love the passion that I have for learning about things. I love that my education was personalized to me. I got to learn about what I wanted to learn about at the pace in which I could learn it. It was amazing, and it was such a blessing. I loved the fact that I was in brownies with all the public school kids. I was in Girl Scouts with all the public school kids. I took classes at my public high school. I got to see what public high school is like. I got to see the social interactions. I got to observe that environment and take bits and pieces of that with me. Now, I do not think that there's anything wrong with being in public school your whole life. I think that some kids might learn better in that structured environment. That's up to you as the parent to decide. All I'm trying to do is share my experience, share why I love homeschooling, and why I think that it's not as scary as the world may make it seem. I think a lot of parents right now are really scared for their kids. They want their kids to be safe. They want their kids to get a good education. They need to go back to work. They need to support their family. They don't know how to do that with their child. So I just kind of want to give like a little word of encouragement, is that whatever you choose for your kid, specifically you're choosing it for your kid, is the right choice to make. God blessed you with that child because he knew that you had the ability to take care of him or her. Whatever decision you make is going to be the right decision. I really hope that throughout this video that you might have heard something that you didn't know about homeschooling, that maybe some of the links that I provide in the description box can help you to make this decision. I would more than love to answer any questions that you have. If you want to leave a comment down below. I would also be very grateful if you share this video with anyone that you know that is considering homeschooling or has any questions about what it's like to be a homeschooler and what it was like growing up as a homeschooler. Yeah, that is all the information I feel like I have to share today. I just want to leave it with take advantage of the world as education. Take advantage of every museum, every stranger, every bank statement, every budget that you could do, everything in your life can help educate you. And I just encourage you to take advantage of that. And to not look down on homeschoolers for the way that they chose to be, like the way that their parents chose to educate them, and to not look down on people that went to public school for the way their parents chose to educate them. Because like at the end of the day, it's all about what you put on your own education. So as the kid, choose to love to learn. Choose to apply everything to your life. Choose to be a vessel, to be a sponge. Soak up the knowledge in the world. So yeah, that's the end of my video. I really hope that I said something that was helpful or a little bit informative. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to have grown up homeschooled and to share what that experience was like. I love it. I have mostly all positive things to say about homeschooling. I feel like the only negative, if anything, was that there were some times where I felt weird. I felt like people thought I was weird. Now looking back on it as an adult, I'm like, so what? People might have thought I was weird as a 12-year-old going in and out of the public middle school, but I learned what I needed to learn, and I'm really grateful for my parents for doing that for me. So yeah, that's all. Bye.